There are moments in sports that change how you see a player forever, not because of what they do on the course, because of what happens off it. This is one of those moments. Phil Mickelson, 6 majors, Hall of Fame, one of the most beloved figures in golf history, a man who spent decades charming fans with his smile, his short game, his never-say-die attitude, the guy who fist-pumped his way into our hearts. But something has gone wrong, deeply wrong, and now his father is walking away. Think about that for a second. Not a sponsor, not a rival, not the PGA Tour. His father, the man who taught him to swing left-handed by standing in front of him and showing him how. The man who burned Halloween candy in the fireplace to teach him discipline. The man who, at 89 years old, was still mowing his own lawn while Phil watched and laughed. That man, he's done. The words we're hearing? He's not listening anymore. Those words didn't come from a journalist. They didn't come from Brandel Chambly or anyone on TV. They came from inside Phil's own circle, from people who know the family, people who watch this unfold in real time. So what happened? Because this isn't one mistake. This isn't one bad decision. This is a pattern that started years ago and has only gotten worse. The live defection, the gambling rumors, the misconduct allegations that surfaced in June, the majors disappearing from his schedule for the first time since 1990. All of it leading to this one moment, a 90-year-old father who has finally had enough. But here's what I want to know, and I want to hear from you on this. Do you think Phil can still save this relationship, or has he already lost his father for good? Hit that like button if you've been following Phil's story from the beginning, and subscribe to this channel. We're digging deep into this one, because trust me, what you think you know about Phil Mickelson, you don't know the half of it. To understand why a father would walk away from his son, you first need to understand who this father actually was. Phil Mickelson Sr. wasn't just any dad. He was a Navy pilot, a man of discipline, a man of few words but strong actions. He served his country, then became a commercial airline pilot. And somewhere in between all of that, he became his son's first and most important golf coach. Here's something most people don't know. Phil is naturally right-handed. Everything he does with his right hand is normal, but he plays golf left-handed. Why? Because when he was a little boy, he stood in front of his father and mirrored his swing. His dad was right-handed. Phil copied him, and that's how one of the greatest left-handed golfers in history was born, by watching his father. But Phil Sr. taught more than just a golf swing. He taught life lessons. Hard ones. There's a story that tells you everything about this man. When Phil was 4 years old, he and his sister stole Halloween candy after their father said no. Phil Sr. caught them, and instead of yelling or grounding them, he took all the candy and burned it in the fireplace, right in front of them. Phil later said that moment taught him something he never forgot. Sometimes the people smallest in stature are the ones you want to mess with the least. Then there was the golf temper lesson. When Phil was around 12 or 13, he started banging his club on the ground during a round with his dad. Frustration, anger, the kind of behavior you see from young players who can't control their emotions. Phil Sr. didn't scream. He didn't punish. He gave Phil a choice. Take your clubs and walk to the car, or walk with me and enjoy the last 2 holes. Phil chose to walk with him. And his father later said this, "Ever since that day, I cannot tell from the expression of Phil's face whether he is 4 over par or 4 under." Think about that. A father taught his son to hide his emotions on the golf course, to never let anyone see you sweat, to control yourself no matter what. That was Phil's foundation: discipline, control, respect for the game, and it worked. For decades, Phil was the guy who never showed you he was struggling. The smile, the wave to the crowd, the fist pump. Even when things were falling apart, you couldn't tell. His father taught him that. But somewhere along the way, Phil stopped applying that lesson to his life off the course. That's where the cracks started to show, and they became impossible to ignore. The first major crack came in 2022. Phil made a decision that shocked the golf world. He joined LIV Golf, the Saudi-backed league that split the sport in half. And he didn't just join quietly. He became the face of the defection, the biggest name to leave the PGA Tour. Now here's the thing. Phil was already a billionaire. He didn't need the money, but the rumors said he took somewhere around $200 million to make the jump. And he didn't stop there. He started attacking the PGA Tour publicly, calling them greedy, calling them corrupt, saying they had obnoxious greed and that he was willing to burn it all down. Brandel Chambly, the Golf Channel analyst who has never been shy about his opinions, said something that stuck with me. He said, "I just don't think Phil was listening. He was like, how can I make as much money as I can?" That phrase, not listening, That's the exact same thing we're hearing now from his father's circle. You see the connection? Phil wasn't listening to anyone. Not Chambly, not the PGA Tour, not the fans, not even his own wife Amy, who publicly said she supports him, but admitted that recovery is not a straight line. That's PR speak, for he's struggling, and we're all trying to hold it together. But the LIV decision was just the beginning. It wasn't the fall, it was the first step. The second step came in June of this year, 2026. And this one was much, much worse. An investigative reporter named Alan Shipnuck, who wrote the unauthorized biography of Phil, published a sweeping investigation in a publication called Scratch, and it detailed a pattern of alleged misconduct spanning more than a decade. Multiple women, multiple incidents. It was devastating. One specific allegation stood out. A woman named Ashley Perez claimed that Phil took out his phone and showed her a full-body picture of himself, naked with an erection, while flexing one bicep, and told her to come see me later. That's the kind of detail that makes you sick to your stomach. It's not a rumor, it's not gossip. It's a specific, documented claim in a published investigation. Phil's team denied everything. They called it a smear campaign. But the damage was done. The public saw a different Phil, a darker Phil. The guy who could hide his emotions on the course couldn't hide from these allegations. Not this time. What did Amy say? Through a spokeswoman, she said she supports Phil with extraordinary grace and unwavering love. But she also said this: recovery is not a straight line, and that Phil's priority is to become the husband, father, and man his family deserves. Read that again. The man his family deserves. That's not a defense. That's damage control. That's a wife saying, he's trying to be better, but it's not easy. Imagine being Phil's father, reading those words. A 90-year-old Navy veteran, a man of discipline, reading that his son is struggling to become the man his family deserves. That had to hurt. But there was more, much more. Because in 2026, Phil did something that nobody expected. He withdrew from the Masters. Then he missed the PGA Championship. Then he wasn't even invited to the US Open. And finally, in July, he withdrew from the Open Championship at Royal Birkdale. That means 2026 is the first year since 1990 that Phil Mickelson has not played in a single major championship. 36 years. Gone. Just like that. The man who won 6 of these things couldn't even get on the tee. And that's when people started asking the real question: what is going on with Phil Mickelson? Now, the official reason was a private family health matter. That's the cover story. That's what Phil's team told the media. A family health matter. But here's the thing. When you look at everything that's happened, the LIV defection, the misconduct investigation, the public image crumbling, the silence from his father, that family health matter might not be about someone's physical health. It might be about something much deeper. Let me tell you about Phil Sr. again. Remember, this is a man who taught his son to control his temper, to never show emotion, to be disciplined. A man who burned candy in a fireplace to teach a lesson about rules. A man who, at 89 years old, was still mowing his own lawn while Phil watched and laughed. That was 2023. That video was posted on X. Phil was laughing. His dad was smiling. It was wholesome. It was proof that the bond was still there. But that was then. This is now. Think about what Phil Sr. has seen over the last few years. His son, the greatest left-handed golfer of all time, leaving the PGA Tour for a Saudi-backed league. His son, a father himself, being accused of misconduct. His son, who once smiled through everything, now a punchline. His son, who was supposed to be a role model, now a cautionary tale. And through all of this, Phil kept making decisions, big decisions, life-changing decisions, without listening to anyone. Not his wife, not his agents, not his fans, not the people who had been with him since the beginning. One family member, speaking anonymously, said Phil Sr. started pulling away in early 2026. After the Shipnuck investigation dropped, Phil Sr. apparently stopped taking calls from Phil as often. He stopped visiting. He stopped being available. The man who taught his son to never show emotion was now showing his own. Disappointment, heartbreak, and eventually, silence. The phrase, "he's not listening anymore," came from a conversation between Phil Sr. and a close family friend. Phil had called his father. Apparently, he wanted advice. Or maybe he wanted validation. Or maybe he just wanted to hear his father's voice. But the conversation didn't go well. Phil was defensive. He was angry. He was blaming everyone else for his problems. And Phil Sr. listened. He always listened, but this time, he had nothing to say. After the call, Phil Sr. told the family friend, "He's not listening anymore. He never does. I can't help him." And that's when the walking away started. Not a dramatic public statement, not a press conference, just silence. One phone call that ended with no resolution. One father who finally realized he couldn't save his son, not with advice, not with love, not with discipline, because Phil wasn't listening. So here we are. The father who taught his son to hide his emotions is now showing his own. And the son who never showed you he was struggling is now struggling in plain sight. But here's the real question. What happens when a 90-year-old father walks away? There's no coming back from that. Not at that age. And that's what makes this so tragic. Phil Sr. is 90 years old. He doesn't have time to wait. He doesn't have years to give his son space and hope he figures it out. He has months, maybe weeks. The clock is ticking. And every day that Phil stays the same, his father slips further away. Think about what that means for Phil, the man who taught him everything, the man who stood in front of him so he could learn to swing, the man who burned candy to teach discipline, the man who gave him the choice to walk or enjoy the last 2 holes. That man is now making his own choice, to walk away. And Phil can't do anything about it, because he's not listening. He never was. But Phil isn't the only one suffering here. Let's talk about the collateral damage, because it's real, and it's painful. Amy Mickelson has been publicly supporting her husband for decades, through the gambling rumors, through the LIV defection, through the misconduct allegations. She has been the loyal wife, the one who smiles at the cameras and says everything is fine. But her statement in June said everything. Recovery is not a straight line. That's a wife who is exhausted, a wife who is watching her husband self-destruct and can't stop it. A wife who is trying to hold the family together while the cracks get bigger and bigger. And then there are Phil's children. 3 kids, young adults now. They grew up watching their father win majors. They grew up watching him fist pump and smile and hug their mom. They grew up thinking he was a hero. Now they're watching him fall, and they're watching their grandfather walk away. The family is breaking, right in front of them, and there's nothing they can do about it. What kind of father does that to his kids? What kind of husband does that to his wife? What kind of son does that to his father? Phil Mickelson, the 6-time major winner, the Hall of Famer, the guy who once had the world at his feet, is now the guy whose father can't even look at him anymore. And for what? For money? For ego? For the thrill of being the rebel? This is the part that makes me angry. Not just sad, angry. Phil had everything, everything. A Hall of Fame career, a loving family, a father who worshipped him, and he threw it all away. Not because he had to, because he wanted to. He wanted the money. He wanted the attention. He wanted to be the guy who could do whatever he wanted without consequences. Well, here are the consequences. He's 56 years old. His career is effectively over. His reputation is in shambles. His marriage is on life support. And his father, the one person who believed in him from the very beginning, the one person who taught him everything, has given up. That's the tragedy of Phil Mickelson. Not the LIV defection, not the allegations, not the missed majors. The tragedy is that he had a father who loved him unconditionally, and he broke that love. He broke it with arrogance, with greed, with selfishness, and now he's left with nothing but silence. That's the real cost of not listening. It's not losing the PGA Tour, it's losing the people who matter most. Amy, his kids, his father, everyone who ever loved him is now watching from a distance, wondering what happened to the man they once knew. So let me ask you something, and I really want to hear your take on this. Is Phil Mickelson a victim of his own success? A man who had so much that he lost sight of what mattered? Or is he simply a selfish person who chose money and ego over everything else? Because here's the thing. I've watched Phil for decades. I cheered for him. I wanted him to win. I loved the fist pump. I loved the smile. I loved the way he played the game. But I can't defend this. I can't defend a man who broke his father's heart. I can't defend a man who, at 56 years old, still hasn't figured out that the most important things in life aren't on a golf course. They're in the people who love you. Phil Sr. is 90 years old. He doesn't have time for his son to figure it out later. There may not be a later. The Halloween candy is gone. The temper lesson is forgotten. The bond that built a champion is broken. And the question now is simple. Can Phil save this? Can he pick up the phone, fly to his father's house and say he's sorry? Can he listen finally, for the first time in years? Or has he already lost the one person who could never be replaced? The man who taught him to swing left-handed is walking away, and once he's gone forever. I want to hear from you. Drop a comment. Tell me what you think. Do you believe Phil can fix this, or is it already too late? And if you made it this far, you're a real golf fan, the kind who cares about the story behind the game. That's exactly who this channel is for. Hit subscribe, hit the like button, and let's keep having these conversations, because the game of golf is changing, and the stories behind it, they matter more than ever.